Coochie coo, baby.
Hello, nieces and nephews, and welcome back to Unkle Orlok's Vault. For this very special Halloween episode, we're going to be looking at a specific year and subgenre, and that is 1981, the year of the werewolf. Werewolf movies, as compared to other monsters and supernatural stories, are usually few and far between. This may have to do with the added budget expense of designing and creating the werewolf itself, as opposed to a rather easy design of a vampire or a slasher or unseen ghosts. As a result, there have been very few good werewolf movies. Werewolves are supernatural creatures that go back to ancient folklore in almost every culture, but especially Eastern European folktales. In Slavic cultures, people who were believed to be werewolves in life are also believed to become vampires in death, hence why Dracula can shapeshift into a wolf. Universal Studios debuted the werewolf as a monster in Werewolf of London. Later in 1941, The Wolfman, starring Lon Chaney Jr., would solidify the werewolf as a legacy movie monster. Written by Kurt Siodmak, The Wolfman sets up most of the movie rules we associate with werewolves today. The Wolfman would show up again in several of the Universal Monster Rally films, even facing off with comedy duo Abbott and Costello. Other notable cinematic versions up to this point include Hammer horror films Curse of the Werewolf from 1961 starring Oliver Reed. 1981 was very unique in that it produced one good and two excellent werewolf movies by two great directors. The first of the three from that year was a movie called Wolfen, starring Albert Finney as a New York City cop investigating a series of brutal deaths that resemble animal attacks. The film is decent with a good crime thriller atmosphere. Wolfen takes a more psychological horror approach to the werewolf legend. But the two movies from 1981 that are not only the most memorable, but in my opinion, the two best werewolf movies ever made, are Joe Dante's The Howling and John Landis's An American Werewolf in London. Both put a new spin on werewolf lore with groundbreaking special effects. Both contain the best werewolf transformations ever put to film before or since. Both also blend horror and comedy in a brand new way. These two films, helped by two young directors at the height of their powers, competed for audience scares and laughs, and in doing so created two horror classics that have never been topped. We're going to compare these two tonight under 7 categories to finally determine which of the two is the greatest werewolf movie of all time. This is The Howling versus An American Werewolf in London. First up in this versus round is cast. Joe Dante, being a fan of 50s and 60s B horror movie, science fiction, and westerns, filled out The Howling with an impressive ensemble cast, filled with notable character actors. Some of the veteran actors included British actor Patrick Macnee, best known as John Steed on the hit British TV spy series The Avengers. Here he plays psychologist George Wagner, aptly named after director George Wagner, who directed the original Wolfman. Also John Carradine, known for often playing villains in Universal horror movies and John Ford westerns. Carradine has over 300 acting credits to his name. The quintessential cowboy actor Slim Pickens, best known for films like Dr. Strangelove and Blazing Saddles. Kenneth Tobey, best known for the original 1951 The Thing from Another World. Kevin McCarthy, best known for the original 1957 Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Dante had previously worked with McCarthy on his first standalone directed feature, Piranha, in 1978. Joe Dante would work again with Kevin McCarthy many times, including movies like Inner Space, Twilight Zone the movie, Matinee, The Burbs, The Second Civil War, Looney Tunes Back in Action, and even a brief cameo in Gremlins.
All right, my children, everyone, they're here already! Your next!
Plus Dante's ever-present good luck charm, actor Dick Miller, who appeared in every single Joe Dante movie from Piranha until his death in 2019. Audiences probably remember him best as Mr. Futterman in Gremlins. Some of the younger lead characters are played by other Joe Dante ensemble regulars, like Belinda Belansky and Robert Picardo, who is absolutely frightening as hell in his first movie role as sexual serial killer and werewolf, Eddie Quist. The film also stars Dennis Dugan, who would go on to direct such movies as Happy Gilmore and Big Daddy, and the late Christopher Stone, who was real-life husband to actress Dee Wallace. Wallace rounds out the cast as the lead character, journalist Karen White, who is sent up to the colony by Dr. Wagner after experiencing a traumatic assault by Eddie Quist. Dee Wallace would go on to star in Steven Spielberg's blockbuster hit E.T. as Elliot's mother, and then a year later gave a tour de force performance in the film adaptation of Stephen King's Cujo. Check out our Mothers of Horror episode for more on that. Now that brings us to An American Werewolf in London's cast. A much more intimate film, American Werewolf stars David Naughton as a very likable yet tragic protagonist, David Kessler. John Landis first saw David Naughton on a Dr. Pepper commercial that was part of a big campaign at the time. Landis felt the young actor projected a charm and likability on screen and could convincingly go from being a Pepper to an American student backpacking across Europe who gets bitten by a werewolf. As David's friend Jack, Landis cast actor Griffin Dunne, son of Dominic Dunne, who would also go on to have a long career as a New York character actor, starring in such films as Martin Scorsese's After Hours and the movie My Girl. The on-screen chemistry between the two actors as best friends really plays well and sets up the rest of the film for what is a rather tragic story hidden under supernatural horror and dark comedy. The first 20 minutes of the film featuring the two friends really shows how a small amount of screen time can build a whole on-screen relationship that the audience can identify with before Jack is brutally killed. The same can be said for the casting of Jenny Agutter as Nurse Alex Price, who soon becomes David's love interest in the film. Agutter, a British actress of both stage and screen, had already been a standout in such films as Nicholas Roeg's Walkabout, Sidney Lumet's adaptation of the stage play Equus, and the Sci-Fi favorite Logan's Run. Also, if you were a young boy or adolescent of the 80s, you definitely developed a crush on Jenny Agutter, especially as Nurse Price. The cast is rounded out with great British character actors of the West End theatre, film, and TV, including Brian Glover, John Woodvine, and David Schofield. Plus, we can't forget John Landis's good luck charm. Like Dick Miller is for Joe Dante, actor, director, and puppeteer Frank Oz appears in every single John Landis movie from the Blues Brothers on. In An American Werewolf in London, Oz technically has two cameos. One as the uptight representative from the American Embassy, Mr. Collins, as well as a brief appearance on the television performing as Miss Piggy on The Muppet Show.
It's good. It's good. It's a good aggressive behavior. Better than my
As a whole, both films have terrific casts, way above the usual cast lineup in a typical 80s horror film. But for our first category in this Versus episode, we have to give this one to the eclectic ensemble cast assembled by Joe Dante in The Howling. Round 1, The Howling. Next category, music. This includes both original scores and needle-drop songs on the soundtrack. The Howling features a sufficiently creepy score by Italian composer Pino Donaggio, best known for his genre scores in films like Nicholas Roeg's Don't Look Now, and especially for his long collaboration with director Brian De Palma, having just come off scoring Carrie in 1976. Dante brought Donaggio on to score his low-budget Jaws takeoff Piranha. Returning for The Howling, Donaggio creates a score which captures the progressive sound of the time, employing a mixture of instrumental orchestrations along with synthesized sounds. The Howling has a decent score which punctuates the scares. It also has a melodic main theme. Though I really like DiMaggio's style, it does sound a bit dated today and lacks that timeless feel. Interestingly, An American Werewolf in London also features an anachronistic soundtrack, but it works much more successfully and enhances the creepiness of the tone. Legendary film composer Elmer Bernstein, who scored many Hollywood classics like The Magnificent Seven, The Great Escape, To Kill a Mockingbird, and later Ghostbusters, plus many more, creates a subdued underscore for the film. Bernstein, known more for his dramatic work, was first brought over to scoring a comedy when John Landis asked him to compose the music for Animal House. Landis knew that a straight dramatic approach would work better for both comedy and horror. That same approach in An American Werewolf in London results in cues like the simple haunting melody played on piano as David and Jack approach the village of East Proctor at dusk, before arriving at the slaughtered lamb. This melancholy melody underscores the tragedy rather than the horror of the two main characters. After all, the Wolfman is a tragic monster. The score is wisely used sparingly, mostly underscoring transitions as well as adding a level of creep factor whenever David's dead friend Jack appears to him.
Tomorrow night's the full moon. You're gonna change.
It's subtle but effective. The only scene where Landis decided to reject a cue Bernstein wrote was during the transformation scene. Bernstein originally recorded a bombastic horror orchestration under the transformation, which for Landis felt too over the top. Instead, Landis opted to go with a pre-existing song that would juxtapose the horror of what we are seeing on screen against what we were hearing on the soundtrack. Then suddenly there appeared before me the only. This brings us to the main reason An American Werewolf in London soundtrack is so memorable. Landis deciding to license existing songs, primarily from the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, adds the appropriate atmospheric tone to the proceedings. All these songs are used in a non-diegetic way, meaning they function like a score, not music that is being played within the world of the movie. Choosing all songs with a moon motif to them. Landis deciding to use the classic piece Blue Moon in variation as a leitmotif. Blue Moon, written in 1934 by Richard Rodgers and Lawrence Hart, has that perfect haunting quality. Especially the ballad version performed by Bobby Vinton, also known as the Polish Prince. Vinton's version opens the film on the moors, setting the atmosphere for what is to come. It's one of my favorite movie openings paired with a perfect piece of music. Blue Moon is later reprised during David's show-stopping werewolf transformation scene. This time, Landis went with the Sam Cooke version. It's reprised one final time at the end with a hard cut to black as the Marcel's doo-wop version plays the audience out. Other Moon songs featured are Bad Moon Rising by Creedence Clearwater Revival and Van Morrison's Moon Dance, played during David and Nurse Price's steamy love scene.
Well, it's a marvelous night for a moon dance with the stars up above in your eyes. A fantabulous night to make romance neath the cover of October skies.
She is one good nurse. Because of this combination of subtle underscoring by Bernstein and the classic timeless haunting songs featured on the soundtrack, round 2 definitely goes to the music of An American Werewolf in London. The next two categories are werewolf design and werewolf transformation. Now for this, we're going to have to start by going back to the sweltering California summer of 1971, when then 20-year-old Rick Baker, a young makeup artist wanting to break into the movie business, met a young John Landis who wanted to make his first feature film as director. The result was a low-budget movie called Schlock, which Landis directed and also starred in as an ape man. The ape suit and makeup was designed by the talented neophyte Rick Baker, who would go on to design many ape makeups for the movies in a long-spanning career. Some include the 1976 Dino De Laurentiis version of King Kong and the ape makeups for the Tim Burton reimagining of Planet of the Apes 2001. But back to our story. While making Schlock, Landis told Baker about his werewolf movie idea. Landis started writing the screenplay for An American Werewolf in London in 1968 while working in the former Yugoslavia as a production assistant on the film Kelly's Heroes. He made Baker promise that if he could get the movie made, he wanted Rick Baker to design the werewolf and execute a full transformation scene in full light. Fast forward to 1980, and Landis' film, up to that point, had failed to materialize, when Baker got a call instead from producer Mike Fennell and director Joe Dante to come aboard the production of The Howling to create the werewolf makeups. Baker started initial pre-production on The Howling, but when word of this got to John Landis, he quickly called up Baker to let him know that American Werewolf in London is finally moving forward. After the success of Animal House and the Blues Brothers, Universal decided to greenlight Landis' odd werewolf movie. Baker then left The Howling to go work on American Werewolf, handing over makeup design and effects duties for The Howling to a young Rob Bottin, who had previously worked on Joe Dante's Piranha. Now the question is, which one is best? For Bottin's work on The Howling, he designed werewolves that fulfilled the underlying fairy tale storybook quality of Dante's film. The colony almost feels like a place existing in a Grimm's Brothers fairy tale. Unlike an American Werewolf, the werewolves of The Howling are shapeshifters and can change their form at will. They don't need a full moon or for it to even be night. As a result, the frightening, iconic design of the full-body werewolves, each with distinguishing characteristics within the pack, are the epitome of giant, 8-foot-tall, half-man, half-wolves. They are evil and they enjoy it, especially the sexual serial killer Eddie Quist. He likes to intimidate his prey. In contrast, Rick Baker, at John Landis' request, created a singular werewolf that resembles a hound from hell. This werewolf, which walks on all fours like a real wolf, is more of a complete transformation from man into animal against his will when the full moon rises. It is large and it is terrifying. In one scene, when the werewolf is chasing a man through a deserted London tube station late at night, the man trips and falls, injuring himself on a moving escalator. In a superb moment of restrained directing, there's a shot from above, directly looking down, where Landis only shows a hint of the werewolf. This moment is frighteningly effective. But if we have to pick between the two on design, the large bipedal werewolves of The Howling really captures that iconic mixture of man and beast fused together into a monster. So for werewolf design, we are giving this first part of the round to Rob Bottin and The Howling. But now we must compare the two transformation scenes. Bottin employed air bladders under latex facial applications to give the illusion of transformation.
To make this picture different, we had to not use camera tricks, and when we shot the actual werewolf transformation through a series of mechanical effects, the actor Bob Picardo, who plays Eddie Quist in the most elaborate transformation in the film, actually changes into a dog, 9-feet-tall dog, before your very eyes without camera tricks.
The Howling transformation depicts Eddie Quist sadistically toying with Dee Wallace's Karen before he intends to viciously murder her. It's a frightening scene, no doubt, but on the negative side, I've always felt the scene goes on a bit too long, and as a result, some effect shots don't hold up as well. Dee Wallace also just doesn't look terrified enough here. Perhaps it's the editing, but it diminishes the effect of the scene as it goes on. Botine's work is still groundbreaking for the time, and he would go on to top himself with the special effects makeups for John Carpenter's The Thing, 1982, and Ridley Scott's Legend in 1985. In contrast, Rick Baker's makeup effects in An American Werewolf in London were not only groundbreaking, but have still not been topped to this day in practical effects.
You know, at the time, I mean, it was the first film where I really had a crew to speak of. You know, I had like one assistant before that. On this film, I had, I think, 6 people helping me, and they were all kids. They were fans of mine that wrote me fan mail. And, you know, one guy was from Texas, and another guy was from Connecticut, you know, and they were kids that I brought out and basically trained. And we, to be honest, we didn't really quite know what we were doing. And we were like, you know, in uncharted ground, basically. I mean, people hadn't done this kind of work before.
The scene begins with the Sam Cooke version of Blue Moon playing over a shot of David reading by himself in Alex Price's flat. A sudden burning pain shoots through his body, causing him to tear all his clothes off. The moment is so abrupt and jarring, it feels painful to watch. Let's also acknowledge the great acting here by David Naughton, who really looks like he's going through the most painful transformation of the human body into something unnatural. The full light and tighter editing of the sequence creates a more intense and realistic scene. I especially love the moment he looks right into the camera towards us in the audience, breaking the fourth wall. Landis does this in other films as well to great effect.
You knew just what I was there for.
A brief shot of Mickey Mouse, another anthropomorphic creature by the way, reminds us of Jack's earlier warning in the film.
Hey, David! I didn't mean to call you meatloaf, Jack!
The mixture of makeups on the actor alongside shots of a prosthetic werewolf head are mostly seamless. It culminates as the most memorable moment in the film and one in horror movie history. I put this scene up there with the shower scene in Psycho and Reagan's head spinning in The Exorcist. Rick Baker would go on to win the first Academy Award ever given out for makeup effects. Plus, let's give a quick shout out to all those makeups of Griffin Dunne post-wolf attack as he gradually decomposes. Clearly, for this round on werewolf transformation, we're giving it to An American Werewolf in London. Round 5. We determine which film has the best story. The Howling tells the tale of a Los Angeles TV anchor, Karen White, portrayed by Dee Wallace. The film opens with Karen being used in a police sting operation to catch serial killer Eddie Quist, played by Robert Picardo. Lured into a pawn shop film booth, Karen comes face to face with Eddie Quist. While a snuff film projects on the screen, Eddie, backlit by the projector, starts to transform into a monster. White survives the attack but is left traumatized by the experience. She goes to see Dr. Wagner, who recommends she and her husband spend some time at a self-help therapy resort Wagner runs known as The Colony. Under doctor's orders, the couple head up the California coast to the colony's bucolic surroundings. Set among several rustic cabins within the dense and foggy Northern California woods, The Colony is a play on the commune living society and new wavy self-help guru craze of the 1970s that was especially prevalent in the northwestern part of the United States. This colony is special, though, since it specifically is catering to a pack of werewolves trying to civilize the beast within. What Karen really needs was a new HMO. Though The Howling has been noted for its semi-humorous screenplay, it was adapted from the more straightforward novel of the same name by author Richard Gary Brandner, which was first published in 1977. After a number of drafts proved unsatisfactory, director Joe Dante hired screenwriter John Sayles to completely rewrite the script. The two had collaborated before on Dante's 1978 film Piranha. Sayles rewrote the script with the same self-aware satirical tone that he gave Piranha. As a result, the final draft of the screenplay bears only a vague resemblance to Brandner's book. Sayles would go on to write and direct such films as 8 Men Out and Passion Fish, among many others. The Howling mixes its scares with what would otherwise be an absurd premise, if they had tried to play it straight like the book. But because Sayles, along with Dante, took the tongue planted firmly in cheek approach, the whole setup pays off. Not to mention classic werewolf and horror movie Easter egg references everywhere in the film.
Whoever is bitten by a werewolf and lives becomes a werewolf himself.
Unlike The Howling, An American Werewolf in London was written as an original screenplay by John Landis himself. American Werewolf starts off on the English moors as the two young American backpackers from New York City are first introduced, sitting in the back of a truck amongst a herd of sheep. The symbolism is pretty blatant. They're warned by the truck driver who is letting them off at the crossroads to stay off the moors and stick to the roads. The young men eventually make their way to the small village of East Proctor, where they come upon a pub called the Slaughtered Lamb. The locals are all huddled together in the pub, but stop and stare at the two young men when they walk through the door. A little later, David and Jack happen to notice the pentangle scrawled on the pub wall.
Look at that. Yeah, what about it?
It's a pentangle, a 5-pointed star. It's used in witchcraft. Lon Chaney Jr. and Universal Studios maintain that's the mark of the wolf man.
When Jack decides to ask the locals what the pentangle means, it doesn't go well.
Excuse me, but what's that star on the wall for?
You made me miss.
They decide to leave, but not before the locals remind them to stick to the roads, and this time, beware the moon.
Stroll on the moors, tra-la-la-la-la. Isn't this fun? It's in front of us.
You think it's a dog? Oh, shit, what is it?
Unfortunately, they don't heed the advice and they are attacked by a large wolf which tears Jack apart. David is bitten but left alive. Later, in hospital in London, David is told that he was attacked by an escaped lunatic, a story the locals gave the police, who was shot and killed at the scene. When David refutes the account, he says they were attacked by a large wolf, but he's not initially believed. While under the care of Nurse Price, David starts having bizarre dreams, some which depict wolf Nazis attacking the family home. The dream within the dream within the dream technique has been overdone in years since, but in American Werewolf, the way Landis executes these moments really works well and offers some of the most abrupt and best early scares in the film. According to Landis, the dreams within dreams concept was influenced by Buñuel's film The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie. While awake, he sees his dead friend Jack standing in his hospital room all torn up.
Can I have a piece of toast?
The scene's initial scare is balanced out by Griffin Dunn's upbeat performance as a bloody corpse, lending it a comedy spin.
The undead surround me. Have you ever talked to a corpse? It's boring.
He warns David that in a few nights, when the moon is full, he will turn into a werewolf and kill innocent people. Jack's corpse begs David to take his own life, or his victims, like Jack, will wander the earth in limbo. David, in a distraught state, believes that he is either hallucinating or perhaps he is indeed a werewolf who, upon the full moon, will change and go on a killing spree.
Beware the moon, David.
The initial inspiration for An American Werewolf in London came to Landis when he was working in the former Yugoslavia and witnessed a gypsy burial at a crossroads. Landis talks about it here.
This guy named Sasha, who was a Yugoslav, who I'm sure is in the War Trials Tribunal now, but he was a driver, very nasty guy, but he spoke perfect English. And he and I were being driven down this road, and we stop. What's going on? We get out, and there were gypsies, and again, you know, I grew up in LA. I mean, for me, it's all the back lot. We get out, there are gypsies, and it's like, they're dress extras. They have babushkas. They look like Maria Usmanskaya. They got the jewelry. They're completely dressed. It's like, hey, wardrobe did a great job with these gypsies, you know. So you felt like you were on another planet. You really were removed. It was a crossroads, and they were burying this man. He was, it was a dead guy, wrapped with a canvas. And the canvas was wrapped with garlands of garlic and rosary. And they're burying this guy feet first, and deep, you know, and it's a burial. And it's some kind of ritual thing.
I couldn't break the custom, even if I wanted to.
He's being buried this way so he doesn't get up and cause mischief. And so I'm going, well, hello? What you mean get up? Like a zombie? Get up? Like what? And Sasha's going, yeah, you know, he thought it was hysterical. There were about 40 people doing this thing. So we stood there for like 45 minutes watching this thing, and Sasha, meanwhile, has just pissed himself. He's laughing so hard. He thought it was the funniest thing. And I kept thinking, what if he did get up?
The perfect blend of comedy and horror really works in American Werewolf in London. Also, its expansion on werewolf lore is very clever. But perhaps its straight storytelling style, reminiscent of the original Wolfman, is what serves the film best. It allows tone and character to come to the forefront. There is no fat on the picture. Every piece leads to the next. Also, because it is more intimate and concise in its storytelling versus the large ensemble of The Howling, you get to spend more time with the main characters and, as a result, really care for them. In the end, you feel the tragedy of this horror tale. You never get the opportunity to feel the same amount of empathy for the main characters in The Howling as you do in American Werewolf in London. And because of that, this round for Best Story goes to the screenplay for An American Werewolf in London. Now we have reached the second to last round, which focuses on comedy. Which film is funnier? Today it's common for comedy and horror to go together like peanut butter and jelly, but at the time The Howling and An American Werewolf in London came out, it was unique and Hollywood executives didn't know if audiences would accept it. Of course, there had been blending of comedy and monsters in the past, but just like werewolves in general, it was thought by the industry suits to be passé. The studio executives, being the creative geniuses they're not, thought it wouldn't work. Both Landis and Dante proved them wrong, launching a whole new era of horror movies mixed with comedy, especially Sam Raimi's Evil Dead 2, which would come out in 1987 and we'll definitely cover on another show. Whether making an audience laugh or scream, both are involuntary visceral reactions. Often making an audience scream while watching a movie in a safe place leads to immediate giggles and laughter. Both rely heavily on timing.
If you don't give the audience something to laugh at in a picture like this, chances are they'll find it in the wrong place. And some of my favorite films, some of my favorite horror films, like The Bride of Frankenstein and Invisible Man, are pictures which combine comedy and horror in a, they juxtapose them in a way that makes the horror a lot more effective, because once the audience has laughed, they're a little off balance, they're a little more relaxed, and then you can sort of hit them.
The Howling and An American Werewolf in London leaned into the absurdity inherent in the supernatural. For the most part, An American Werewolf blends its scares nicely with the horror, like David talking to the decomposing corpse of Jack in the back of a porno theater in Piccadilly Circus.
Hi, Jack. Hi, David.
Oddly enough, both films have scenes with people in porno theaters.
I watch you on TV. I'm gonna light up your whole body, Karen.
Good movie. Mm-hmm.
The fake porn film playing in the theater we see advertised earlier in the tube station as See You Next Wednesday, a title that appears in every John Landis film in the background and comes from a single line in 2001: A Space Odyssey.
See you next Wednesday.
Some of the humor, though, does come across a little bit forced at times, like the slapstick moments between the two detectives. The Howling, as mentioned before, embraces a satirical spin from the beginning, and in my opinion, is more consistent with its satire throughout. The height of absurdity comes at the end of The Howling, in the very last scene and montage. Without giving it completely away here for those who haven't seen The Howling yet, the film culminates in this tongue-in-cheek coda which sends the audience out with a smile in a typical Joe Dante way. So, for this round on comedy, we're giving it to The Howling.
Who's afraid of the big bad wolf?
Okay, so 3 rounds so far went to The Howling for cast, werewolf design, and comedy, while 3 rounds have also gone to An American Werewolf in London for music, werewolf transformation, and story. So, we're at a tie here, 3 for 3. That's just a coincidence, has nothing to do with the show. So this last category will determine the winner of which is the best werewolf movie of all time. If we're talking about horror movies, the reason we love them is for the scares. So, which film is scarier? Though there is comedy in An American Werewolf in London, there is no question it is first and foremost a horror movie.
See, American Werewolf in London is not a comedy. It's called a comedy. They keep calling it a comedy. It's very funny, I hope. It is not a comedy. This is a horror film, and a pretty classic and traditional one. If anything, Werewolf is a throwback. I mean, I was trying to make a contemporary version of an old movie.
When Landis plays it for the scares, he plays it straight and brutal. There are several intense, tension-building scenes in the film. Some of the standouts include the build-up to the first attack on the moors with David and Jack.
It's moving. It's circling us. Ah, fuck.
The tube station scene. The dream sequences. Plus the transformation scene. They all pay off with brutal carnage, either briefly glimpsed or insinuated. There are also several great jump scares in the film.
Hello? Have you been up long?
I've just had a nightmare.
Not to worry, I've just the thing.
Though not overused like horror movies today. But for me, most importantly, Landis creates a creepy atmosphere of dread that hangs over the entire film. Some of this is enhanced by the music choices, the real locations in England, and by artful naturalistic lighting and foreboding dialogue scenes. The horror, though supernatural, somehow still feels real, or real enough to suspend disbelief. The Howling also has some great creepy atmospheric moments, especially using the location and primal fear of the woods at night, especially in the fog. The most disturbing scene may be Eddie Quist behind Dee Wallace's Karen inside the porno film booth.
Hello, Eddie.
I knew you'd come, Karen.
The werewolves are appropriately scary and include some gruesome kills. The sequences with actress Belinda Balaski as the character Terry, Karen's friend, being attacked 2 different times by werewolves are actually some of the scariest moments in the film. Incidentally, in both Piranha and The Howling, Joe Dante gives Balaski the best and saddest horror character deaths. But because of the underlying satire, especially at the very end of The Howling, which softens the horror aspects just a bit, while contrasting it with an American Werewolf in London's ending, which is a bloodbath of extreme carnage. And a final gut punch for the main characters. We have to give this final round to an American Werewolf in London as the scariest of the two. So, in a final score of 4-3, we are giving the title belt to an American Werewolf in London as the best werewolf movie of all time. Now, do you agree or disagree? Tell us why in the comment section below. Until next time, stick to the roads and beware the moon. The moon. The moon. Excuse me. Well, it's just that time of the month. What do you want me to say? Every dog has its day. Coochie coo, baby.
Bomb, 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 dang, 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 ding, a dong, ding, blue moon, 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 blue moon, dip, 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 moon, 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 blue moon, dip, 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 moon, moon, blue moon.
Go now, and heaven help you.